Welcome to AHRC TV's weekly roundup. I'm Josephina Bergström. This week, AHRC TV will continue its coverage of the recent meeting of Asian parliamentarians, i.e. the 4th annual Asian Alliance Against Torture and Ill-Treatment and for Fair Trial meeting. Excerpts in this program include talks by Sri Lankan Deputy Minister Eran Wickramaratne on possibilities for justice institution reform in the newly democratized island nation, and by ex-Indian police officer Dr. P.M. Nair on the kind of policy changes required to guarantee fair trial through modern policing in Asia. Over to the conference.
How far is our clarity in understanding and appreciating the concept of democracy as quintessentially a discussion point about freedom, dignity, and equality? Now, these are three simple words, but when we deconstruct these three words, it encompasses all these aspects that we have been talking about. The problem is that our understanding of democracy often tend to limit to casting vote or electing our government. It is much more than that.
There are three main pillars a country has as far as constitution is concerned. There is executive, judiciary, and legislature. Executive means an elected government, including police. Legislature, the parliament, and the elected government, they go hand in hand. Thus, in order to have police reforms or to overcome the obstacles in the reformation of police, it is necessary there should be a political will. Without a political will, the obstacles cannot be overcome.
We need a modernization of the policing, making police well-trained, well-educated, and well-equipped. That is one thing that we can do, we should do in every country that we are present here. All of us agreed on that, I think. And how can we begin that thing? Can there be a kind of regional cooperation on Asia level for that? I think that should be contemplated over. And that is necessary. In your think tank also, if this kind of regional cooperation is possible, we in Nepal are ready to cooperate on it, we can do. We said that good laws that bans on ill treatment, that goes deep inside this torture, root causes of torture, that is necessary, we agreed. And we are the parliamentarians here. We can move in that direction in our country immediately. In my country, that law is in the parliament, and I can move for that.
After the war in 2009, there was a good chance Mahinda Rajapaksa had to create a national harmony with the other communities and even go for the political solution for the ethnic issue. But Mahinda Rajapaksa, he didn't do that. He thought he can win the next election also from the majority votes. That means Sinhalese Buddhist vote. He thought like that, and he never go for the political solution for the war, and he didn't make a national harmony with the other communities. And on behalf of that, what he did, mainly there was some extremist group in the southern part of the Sri Lanka called BBS and some other groups. So he openly gave those groups to work around the Sri Lankan society to attack the minority people. They were targeting Christianity and the Muslim community.
The fair trials are dependent on basically three broad principles. One is that the courtroom must be governed by the rule of law and the principle of non-discrimination. Now, this is very important in our context, whether we think about it socially or whether we think about it ethnically or in whatever way. So, it has to be the rule of law and principles of non-discrimination. The second principle is we must have the ability to place the victim at the center of the justice system. You know, some of these things are so obvious, and I am stating the obvious, but they are not very obvious actually in practice. And then we need to ensure the rights of the defendants, that it is not compromised as you progress through the criminal justice system, right, from the time somebody is arrested to the time of the trial. So, these three broad principles, right, need to be really upheld if there is going to be a fair trial.
Modern policing is an important factor in ensuring fair trial and rule of law. Modern policing and policy are concomitant. Concept policing does not start or end with police alone, police per se, but what is meant is all related stakeholders and institutions which together constitute a rule of law. In that background, why torture? Why torture? It's there everywhere, not only the police, the customs, enforcement directorate, drug enforcement, intelligence agencies. We hear torture across the spectrum. We only think of the police, but if you see the entire scenario, torture is everywhere.
That you cannot arrest a person without a warrant. You cannot open fire even in the at the Raj time, British Raj time. To open fire on a mob, you need a magistrate written order. But today Bangladesh is a democratic, so-called democratic independent country. Nobody bothers. The policeman open fires whenever he or she likes. As Zaman knows, really every day anything, they're catching the man, putting into station Hazrat, tied up, they kill him, say that encounter. My hands are tied, no gun, how can I encounter?
In the Asian context, the powerful, the moneyed, the person in authority, the political leader, the person in the chair, the person who can command and control are never ever subjects of torture. It's always the powerless, the weaker section of society, the downtrodden, etc. who are tortured. Therefore, torture is a class phenomenon.
People started to believe that torture is necessary to curb crime for the police as an instrument.
Torture in any form is a threat to democracy. It will espouse, stimulate, enhance, exacerbate and institutionalize non-democratic measures. The fear psychosis among the public manifests in different walks of life, like the fear of women to walk on roads, fear of people to walk into a police station to make a complaint, etc., demolishes the spirit of democracy, even if the elected government is in power. Even if elected government is in power. Therefore, if not addressed and nipped in the bud, undemocratic activities will take over the democracy, and the latter will be worse than autocracy, as is happening today. Therefore, for the survival of real democracy and to ensure rule of law, we must all get together and prevent torture in all its form and manifestations.
Unless you address these problems, what is the meaning of talking about human rights? We go and say, you sign this, you sign, do all this. When you go back home, when a man comes, a man or a woman who has a problem come to the court, there is no remedy. There is no, so when people find that the courts are unable to give them adequate remedy, then they ask, why should we go there at all? Then what happens? You can't live in a vacuum. Well, we must solve our problem in some other way. If my neighbor or somebody is troubling me, the court cannot solve that problem, then I must find some other way. What is some other way? I go to a criminal.
United Nations is a sum of the member states. It's the common will of the of all member states of the humanity. And if United Nations is weak, that means that humanity wants it to be weak. If it's strong, that means we all want it to be strong. So after all, it's up to us to lobby our governments, or to lobby our different governments, if need arises, to make United Nations stronger, to empower United Nations. United Nations itself does not act. Secretariat of the United Nations implement the decisions taken by the member states.
You know, we are in an agreement that it is the political masters who are the roots of all problem. But at the same time, we all agree that it is a political problem, so it has to be solved politically. Which means it is the political masters who needs to solve this, who needs to bring about changes. Now the question is why would they do it? I don't believe the political leadership in the South Asia will actually do something to bring about change when it comes to human rights and the institutional reforms, unless and until they're compelled to do so. And that compulsion has to come if there is a civil society movement. Ultimately, where I see the only hope, that it is the young people, especially the students, who has to come forward. And they have to be mobilized. Only the students can bring change. I don't expect that the civil society in Bangladesh can actually create a pressure on the political masses.
Very often what happens is that social change comes faster than we think. But at that point, many places, there are no people who are prepared for the next step, because we are so bewildered by the existing situation, which is hopeless, in many ways looks hopeless, and we try to do something around. We do not try to see ahead. That is exactly the situation we see in Sri Lanka. Many, before January 8th, many people did not even think that it is possible that within short time there can be a change. Now the change has come. People do not know what to do with the change.
Up until the 9/11 incident, the issue of torture at least was in the close to the center stage in the United Nations forums and discussions. But after that, even bureaucrats working, experts working within the UN themselves have critiqued that it has been taken away. The prominence of dealing with the question of torture itself was taken away in the United Nations. Much less was early on the attempt to engage head-on through the horns on justice institution deficits. Perhaps there are many reasons. One of the prominent reasons that we find while also engaging with our partners outside the country context where we work with is that the culture, the historical memory of what existed at one point of time, how the change happened, has already moved on. I mean, it has been back into the, put back into the freezer, that today's generation finds it difficult to understand the depth of the problems that we in Asian jurisdictions face. So it is always a challenging exercise from our Asian perspective to communicate to a non-Asian person who's actually interested in engaging with these issues.
When the reality is like that, how could the human rights work carry on without addressing these problems? This is heart of our problem. Because it is difficult, nobody wants to think about it. And others they can't understand that such things happen. You go to a UN meeting or something, you say it's like this. Now how can it happen? But what did your judge do? Didn't the police investigate? So they take it for granted that the situation in a developed country, where this, for example, in Hong Kong, has never heard of a disappearance for last at least from about last 40 years, except for now and then some businessman kidnapped, then the whole force is put to, into that task. Otherwise, you don't hear a thing like that in this place about anything called a disappearance. They won't understand what a disappearance is. It's like something mad, Can human being, you mean, disappear? But for us, it has become normal. Oh, disappeared. How many? 30,000. So that's so the developed country expert cannot intervene into this, because he simply cannot understand that such a thing is true. They will say, then there's something wrong with your system, put the system in correct, maybe you give some training programs to your police and training programs for your judges, things will be okay. That is why they put a lot of money into some few training programs in order to now solve this problem, because they are trying to solve a problem they have not understood. So that is what the major problem in the human rights movement began to be. As far as the developed country, the underdeveloped country is concerned, the UN and others, well-intentioned people, and they were putting a lot of money also, they were trying to solve a problem, but they have not understood the problem.
The basic assumption by the think tank is that there's something very wrong in the international system, where they do not get what's actually going on in the countries where you live and work. And the discussion you have here is not a discussion that they can actually understand, or maybe, and they definitely can't act upon it. And why is this? It's because you talk a political language, and the UN talks a technical language, right? When we had the discussion earlier, when you were diagnosing your situations in your different countries, you would end up in, we have to change the prosecutor. We have to do another statutory law changing this. But that is exactly the same way in which the UN system thinks, that there is a technical solution to political problems. And that's why we have ended up now there's research coming out now from many places saying that all these technical things we've tried to change, reform societies, have failed. And we have invested so much money and time and effort into this. And if people just have asked people from where you come from, what are the real problems, then we might have ended up in another place. They're blind to it, and they are deliberately blind to it, because it means they have to think politically, and that is much more difficult than thinking technically.
It's a constant issue, both informally and formally, in interactions with the United Nations staff, with the United Nations experts. We need new ideas, and everyone realizes that it's a paradigm shift right now. And they realize the ideas can be supplied only by people who work on the ground, who work with the victims of human rights violations. And definitely that's the role of the United Nations, to listen to our ideas and have them implemented through their authority and through their channels. And it's an existential issue for the United Nations right now, because it's either they do it or fail historically.
That is all for this weekly roundup. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching, and see you again next week.